You're not here by chance. Something within you, something subtle yet powerful, led you to this video in this exact moment. And once you reach the end, you'll understand why. This is not just another coincidence in your life. This is a calling from your inner self, a quiet nudge from your soul that has been guiding you without noise or spectacle. Because transcending your old self is not a loud, dramatic transformation. It doesn't come with fireworks or grand declarations. It's something quiet, almost imperceptible, a silent journey that unfolds inwardly. It's not about becoming someone new with external changes. It's about shedding what never truly belonged to you in the first place. It's about remembering who you have always been at your core. This kind of transformation doesn't shout, it whispers. It feels like waking up one day and realizing you no longer belong to the identity you used to cling to. You no longer resonate with the same spaces, with the same conversations, or even with the same parts of yourself that once defined you. Carl Jung once said that true spiritual growth doesn't come from perfecting your personality. It comes from transcending it, letting go of all that is non-essential, all that was built as armor or illusion, to remember the essence of your soul, that quiet, unwavering truth that has always been within you. And one of the first signs of this shift is that you no longer identify with your past story. What once felt like a central part of your identity now feels distant, like watching an old movie. You can see it, even remember it, but it doesn't define you anymore. There's no longer any need to reject it, nor do you feel a wave of nostalgia for it. You feel calm when you remember, because now you can observe your journey without feeling the urge to explain or justify it. You no longer tell your story from the wound. You don't define yourself by what you suffered or what you achieved. You know it was all part of your path, but you also know with a deep, unshakable certainty that your worth is not measured by any of it. What happened no longer controls who you are or limits what you can become. And in the space once filled with guilt or pride, something new is born. A gentle freedom that allows you to see your past for what it truly is, the past. This emotional distance isn't about detachment, it's about integration. You don't need anyone to understand your pain anymore. You don't seek validation for what you lived. You no longer feel the urge to explain what made you who you are. You simply know. Your silence honors it. And that is enough. You begin to notice that the things that used to trigger you, that once stirred something deep inside, now pass through you without leaving a scar. Words that once pierced you now dissolve in your awareness. Relationships that once kept you anchored to outdated versions of yourself start to lose their grip. Not because you're rejecting them, but because there's nothing left in you for them to hold on to. As you transcend your old self, your emotions stop dictating your reactions, not because you disconnect from your feelings, but because you learn to discern what part of you is responding from the present, and what part is simply repeating familiar patterns. Your inner narrative begins to shift. The thoughts you once repeated for survival no longer play in your mind. You're no longer seeking redemption. You're not punishing yourself for the person you used to be. You simply observe and move forward, as if something within you knows that every chapter before this one was necessary to bring you here. That deep understanding does not come from the intellect. It comes from the soul. And it is in that awareness that your old self begins to dissolve, not because it vanishes, but because you no longer live there. And when you stop inhabiting that old version of yourself, something inside you becomes lighter. You don't forget what you lived. You simply no longer need it as your foundation. Your choices begin to arise from a place that is freer, clearer, more aligned with who you truly are, not with the story you used to tell about yourself. Those self-definitions that once felt so solid, "This is just how I am," or "I can't change," begin to blur. Not because you fought against them, but because they no longer make sense to the person you are becoming. You no longer act out of a need to maintain a firm identity. You've realized your soul doesn't need labels to feel alive. Transcending your old self isn't about destroying it. It's about honoring what it once was and moving forward without dragging along what no longer serves you. You stop clinging to the persona you created to survive. You no longer feel the need to repeat emotional patterns or adjust yourself to fit into spaces you've outgrown. And the gentleness with which you let go, the ease with which you release without resistance, is the clearest sign that you are no longer vibrating from a conditioned self. You are beginning to live from your true self, the self that doesn't need to defend or prove anything, the self that simply is. And then something else happens. Your way of connecting with others begins to shift. And not because you planned it. It happens naturally. You start relating to others from a clearer, more honest, more unburdened place. You no longer seek in someone else what you've learned to give yourself. You don't look for a savior. You don't need to be seen to feel real. Your presence is no longer something you bargain with out of fear of being alone. In the past, your relationships were often built on need, on unspoken agreements rooted in pain, on unconscious emotional trade-offs. But now, there is space. Space to breathe. Space to pause before reacting. Space to observe without absorbing everything. When you transcend, you stop repeating the emotional patterns that once held you captive. Not because the world has changed, but because you are no longer making choices from your wounds. Your sensitivity no longer leads you blindly. Your giving no longer comes from emptiness. It arises from balance. And that changes everything. Your relationships stop being mirrors of what you lack and become reflections of what you already are. You no longer seek conversations to avoid silence or intimacy to escape yourself. You are finally able to share from a place of fullness, not from a sense of lack. And this is the essence of true transformation, when you no longer need to be anything other than what you are, when your past no longer defines you, when your emotions serve as messengers, not masters, when your story becomes a sacred memory instead of a living script. That's when you know you've begun to remember who you truly are. Even if someone doesn't resonate with you, there is no drama. There is no resentment or internal rupture, because your emotional stability no longer relies on someone else's willingness to stay. You now place your peace in someone else's hands. And that shift, that quiet, invisible shift, changes everything. When you begin to embody emotional independence, you discover a version of freedom that is not just liberating, but grounding. You're no longer running away, nor clinging. You're simply present. And that is enough. Your presence, once a background element of who you were, becomes your new language of love. A love that doesn't demand, that doesn't beg to be seen, that doesn't wait for reciprocity to feel real. It's a quieter love, deeper and more genuine. It doesn't scream through promises or perform affection to be validated. It simply is, steady, congruent, and peaceful. Not because it's trying to prove something, but because it doesn't need to. You begin to connect from a place of truth, not from a need to uphold an image, or fulfill a role. You no longer invest energy in conversations that don't resonate, nor do you maintain relationships that exist only out of habit or history. Your energy, more refined and attuned, naturally filters out what doesn't align. And even if that process stings, it also brings relief. It brings clarity. Your old self used to choose from urgency, from fear of being left behind, from desperation to be accepted at any cost. But now, you no longer choose that way, because you've made peace with your own silence. You've learned to sit with it, to welcome it like an old friend. You know that the company of someone who doesn't truly connect with you can feel lonelier than your own solitude. So, you stay with yourself, even if that means walking away from what you once thought was love. You stop confusing intensity with truth and drama with depth. You begin to recognize that what brings peace is what truly has roots, and what needs constant tension to survive is often just a mask for disconnection. You no longer try to force understanding. You don't need to convince anyone of your growth or justify why you can no longer remain in spaces that stifle your soul. Your vibration, the energy you emit simply by being true to yourself, begins to speak louder than any words. And without meaning to, it triggers reactions in those who haven't yet crossed their own thresholds. Some will drift away. Others will draw near, but from a different place. From honesty, not from need. And you will be at peace with both, because your center is no longer defined by your relationships. Now your center defines your relationships. In this new order, whatever stays, does so because it truly resonates, not because it is being forced to. This profound change in how you relate to others quietly reshapes your entire reality. What once felt essential now gently dissolves. And this is not rejection, it's clarity. Clarity born from having explored your own darkness so thoroughly that you no longer need to project it onto others. Your old self searched for mirrors. People who would confirm your worth, who would fill your empty spaces with half-presences and temporary comforts. But you are no longer available for that kind of bond. You've come to understand that a true connection doesn't consume you. It expands you. It doesn't ask you to betray your essence. It invites you to live it more fully. And when you begin to connect from this renewed energy, everything changes. Connections become subtler, more honest, lighter. The strength of a bond no longer lies in how loud or intense it is, but in its frequency, in that silent space where two souls can simply exist together, without explanation, without rescue, without clinging. In this new state, you learn to set boundaries, not from fear, but from love, self-love. And these boundaries don't divide. They bring order. They organize your energy, your time, your internal space. You no longer exhaust yourself trying to maintain what isn't growing with you. You don't stay out of fear of losing the little that's left. You've shifted into another vibration, one that doesn't apologize for evolving. You no longer feel the need to ask forgiveness for choosing your truth. And that, in itself, is proof that your old self is no longer the one guiding your relationships. Now, it's your soul. And your soul only chooses what nourishes, what uplifts, what reminds you of who you truly are. From this place, you begin to understand the true purpose of companionship, not to complete you, but to share who you've already become. You no longer seek shelter in others because you have become your own safe space. And this energetic self-sufficiency doesn't mean isolation. It means soul-level maturity. You stop carrying emotions that don't belong to you. You stop absorbing what others refuse to transform. You no longer fall into the trap of healing those who haven't chosen healing for themselves. You no longer dissolve in patterns where you once tried to be enough by becoming less of yourself. Because now, real love is not disguised sacrifice. It is presence without pressure, connection without chains. And it's within that clean, quiet connection that the most powerful things begin to unfold. You become a mirror of transformation for others, not because you intend to lead or guide them, but simply because your vibration reaches them. Your mere presence in a state of coherence starts to reveal the truths others have long avoided within themselves. Some will be thankful for this, while others may resist it. But either way, you remain at peace, because your connection is no longer born from duty or obligation. It's rooted in the freedom of being authentically yourself. And it's in that space where you begin to understand something profound. The deepest, most meaningful bonds are not those that promise the most, but those that honor each other's evolution. That level of connection can only arise once you've walked through your own personal transformation. You've faced your old self, embraced it, and lovingly released it, not out of rejection, but with understanding. You finally see that your past version wasn't wrong or broken. It was simply trying to protect you the only way it knew how. But now, that protection is no longer necessary. You no longer need to hide behind a character or wear a mask just to feel worthy of love. You've stopped striving to be accepted. Now, you simply are, and that is enough. Without effort, without seeking approval, your essence begins to radiate more purely than ever before. And in that purity, you discover a new kind of intimacy. It's not about sharing every wound or narrating your journey in detail. It's about allowing yourself to be seen as you are, right now, without decoration, without pretense. You no longer carry the weight of old disguises. It no longer offends you to be misunderstood. It doesn't wound you like before, to be overlooked or left behind. That's because the source of your value no longer resides in the eyes of others. It lives within the relationship you've built with yourself. A relationship that was born out of silence, out of lonely nights, where you chose not to fall back into old patterns, out of days when you decided to hold yourself together even when nothing else was holding you. From that deep root, your old self gently steps away, not because you banish it, but because it no longer resonates with your current frequency. You can look back and honor that version of you as part of your story, recognizing that it did the best it could with what it knew, with what it had, and with what it believed was necessary to survive. But you're no longer surviving. You're creating. And in this state of conscious creation, there's no room left for the rigid structures of the past. Now there is space for softness, for subtlety, for that which vibrates without needing to shout. Your soul no longer needs to impress, defend, or prove its light. It simply inhabits it. And from that space, every relationship that remains or enters your life becomes a reflection of this new state of being. A state where love no longer feels like a burden, but a support that doesn't invade. Where sharing doesn't stem from lack, but from fullness. Where choosing someone or something isn't about clinging, but about honoring what aligns with who you are now. Your vision of life shifts in a way that can't be undone. You stop perceiving things the way you used to. What once looked unfair to you now reveals itself as part of a bigger design. What you once labeled as mistakes are now recognized as crucial moments of growth and transformation. You no longer speak to yourself as a victim. Your consciousness has expanded enough to recognize that even the most painful moments carried a greater purpose beyond the suffering. Transcending your old self doesn't just mean healing your wounds, it means seeing from a higher vantage point. Not because it makes you feel better, but because your soul can no longer look through the same lens. You've elevated internally, and that inner elevation allows you to perceive what once felt like chaos as hidden order, as silent teachings, as coded messages waiting to be understood. Even your relationship with time begins to shift. You no longer live in a constant state of waiting. You don't chase after what slips away, nor do you insist that everything must happen now. You start to live in harmony with the natural rhythm of your soul, a rhythm that isn't rushed by external pressures, but guided by inner maturity. In this rhythm, everything flows differently. Your priorities reorganize. What once seemed so important now fades, and the things you once overlooked now feel sacred. You begin to value silence. You revere the pause. You trust the process, even when you don't understand every step. You no longer need guarantees to move forward. You just need to feel aligned. And that's enough. Because now, you know the soul doesn't need to understand everything to keep going. It just needs to be in tune with what resonates as truth. This alignment with your truth becomes your compass. You stop making decisions from fear of making mistakes. You stop living from the urgency of fulfilling other people's expectations. Your choices are no longer reactions to a painful past. They're quiet acts of honoring your present. And that simple but powerful shift changes everything about how you experience life. You no longer force meaning out of every situation. You've learned that true understanding often arrives only after you've let go. And with that level of energetic maturity, you stop trying to control everything. You release the need to demand answers from life in the moment. You begin to live with more softness. And that softness doesn't mean weakness or passivity. It means power, refined and silent. Your strength becomes something inward and unwavering. You no longer feel compelled to showcase your process or prove your transformation to anyone. Your most honest silence speaks more than words ever could. And that changes how you walk through the world. You begin to move through your days with more awareness. The smallest moments, the brief pauses, the subtle gestures begin to feel meaningful. You're no longer chasing the next accomplishment, nor measuring your growth by what's visible to others. Now, you measure it by what you feel when you wake up in the morning, by the calm you sense when you're alone, by the peace that hums inside you, even when everything around you is moving. Transcending the old self means stepping beyond the limited identity you once clung to, living from a higher plane of perception without ever needing to leave your body. It's inhabiting a new frequency, a different state of being, without escaping from the world you know. It is no longer about reacting to what life throws at you, but about consciously choosing how you want to experience your reality. This conscious choice becomes the seed of transformation. It shifts the way you relate to every single part of your existence. What used to feel like a burden can now become an opportunity to be fully present. What once drained you now dissolves quietly and gently, without resistance, without resentment. And though this transformation may not be immediately visible to others, it is deep, enduring, and powerful. Because now you no longer rely on your circumstances to feel peace. Your inner peace is no longer dependent on whether things go your way or not. It flows from how faithfully you are living in alignment with your true self. And that inner fidelity, it's non-negotiable. It becomes your anchor, your center, your guiding truth. The old self measured its worth through goals achieved, through the approval of others, through applause and external validation. But you're no longer chasing after those illusions. You've discovered that true fulfillment doesn't come with noise. It reveals itself quietly, in the rhythm of your breath, in the way you choose your words, in the calm dignity with which you walk away from anything that no longer nourishes your soul, without causing harm or conflict. You begin to view challenges differently. They're no longer punishments or obstacles meant to break you. They are thresholds, gateways that your soul must pass through in order to awaken the dormant parts of you. You stop running from them. You face them with the inner knowing that they're not here to destroy you, but to unveil you. And that shift changes your energy at the most fundamental level. Your vibration no longer emits fear or doubt. It radiates truth. A truth that needs no defense, that speaks for itself in your eyes, your presence, your stillness. And it is in that moment of inner clarity that you realize the most significant change did not happen outside of you. It happened within you. The deepest transformation was never about rearranging your environment. It was about seeing life through the lens of your awakened soul, no longer through the filter of a self that needed fixing, proving, or pleasing. From that place of awakening, the ordinary becomes sacred, not because the world has changed, but because your perception is no longer tinted by lack or fear. Your gaze softens, it expands, it becomes filled with gratitude. You no longer need divine signs to believe, nor absolute certainty to move forward. You start walking with a slower inner rhythm, not because you've slowed down externally, but because you're no longer chasing things that were never meant for you. You grant yourself the freedom to choose differently, even if no one understands. You give yourself permission to not have all the answers, to not be in control, to leave space for the mystery to unfold itself, because you now trust that life is working with you, not against you. And in that sacred space, everything begins to align, not because you're doing more, but because you're resisting less. Your vibration becomes a magnet, attracting only what resonates with who you've become. You no longer need to force, to hold on, or to push. What is meant for you stays. What isn't simply fades away, peacefully and without drama. Even the difficulties that show up begin to take on a new shape. They don't vanish, but they no longer shatter you like they once did, because you're not approaching them from the same wounded version of yourself. You now face them with a depth that doesn't need immediate answers, but seeks true understanding, with a maturity that doesn't aim to win, but to stay in alignment. You meet life not with urgency, but with presence. You stop striving to be someone and start embodying who you truly are. And in that embodiment, everything changes. Not suddenly, not loudly, but completely. And that, though no one else may see it, changes absolutely everything. Because when your energy aligns with your truth, your reality begins to respond in kind. No chaos, no struggle, just synchronicity, just clarity, just that quiet whisper within you that speaks without words, that reminds you effortlessly of what you've always known. You're no longer who you used to be. You've transcended. And that transcendence doesn't announce itself. It is embodied, felt in silence, recognized only by the depth of your presence. There's no exact moment when it all clicks, no marked point of arrival. One day, you simply notice you don't react the same way. The things that used to hurt you now barely reach you. You no longer move through life driven by the urgency that once dictated your inner world. You've changed, not on the surface, but at the root. And that kind of change runs so deep, it doesn't need a name to be real. You feel it in how you carry yourself, in how you choose peace over performance. It shows in your ability to sit in silence without anxiety, to welcome uncertainty without losing your center, to live from what's essential without dressing it up. Your energy no longer scatters in 1,000 directions. It consolidates, it aligns, it becomes a current, one that moves not from pressure or expectation, but from a source within you that has no name and needs no explanation. This source, this guidance, comes from a connection to something deeper than your identity, your labels, your story. You no longer exist to maintain an image. You exist to express an essence. That essence that has always been with you, waiting patiently while you were busy chasing, proving, surviving, waiting for you to stop orbiting the same distractions. And you did. You let go. You chose differently. You walked forward. And without even realizing it, you transcended, not as an achievement, but as a natural outcome of choosing honesty over habit, of staying true to yourself when silence was harder than noise, of standing by your soul when turning back would have been easier. Now, that old version of you is no longer in control, and in its place stands someone real, someone calmer, someone more you than you've ever been. From this place of authenticity, a new chapter begins, not one where you react, but one where you respond with presence. You no longer chase approval because you've remembered your own worth simply by existing. You no longer seek belonging because your soul has remembered its eternal home was always within you. Life is no longer a race. It becomes a sacred unfolding, not because everything is perfect, but because you've stopped resisting what isn't. You welcome each moment, not with resignation, but with a peace that comes from reconciliation with the now. Your days are no longer a cycle of repetition. They become a living expression of your new frequency. Each word you speak, each gaze you offer, each step you take carries the imprint of someone who has chosen to live from their center. And that imprint, though invisible, leaves an undeniable impact, because a soul that has transcended its former self doesn't need to move mountains to transform the world. Its very presence is healing. It's a silent medicine, a reminder that living in alignment is not only possible, it is powerful. It shows others that healing is not a myth, that letting go doesn't mean forgetting, that becoming doesn't mean rejecting who you were. It means honoring the journey, understanding that every step prepared you for this one, this moment, this now. And now that you're here, your vibration speaks for you, and the world responds. If you felt this message resonate somewhere deep inside you, it's not a coincidence. Your soul already knew. It was simply waiting for you to remember yourself. Because transcending the old self is not an ending, it is a beginning. A beginning where you finally return to yourself fully, without fear, without masks, without weight. Carl Jung once said that enlightenment doesn't come from imagining figures of light, but from making the darkness conscious. And in those few words lies a truth that most people spend a lifetime avoiding. Because facing your darkness, acknowledging your shadow, is one of the most terrifying and liberating experiences a human being can endure. It's not a poetic metaphor. It's a raw, sometimes painful process of peeling back the layers of who you thought you were, only to meet the parts of yourself you tried so hard to ignore. suppress, or deny. And yet, if you're listening to this now, it's because something inside you has already shifted. You've crossed that invisible threshold where you no longer fear the dark corners of your mind. You've chosen to stop running. You've dared to look inward, to confront the wounds, the memories, the patterns, and the emotions that once held power over you. That is not a small step. That is the beginning of true transformation. You see, the shadow isn't something to be destroyed or erased. It's not your enemy. It is a part of you that has been waiting, often in silence, for your acceptance, for your love. Making the darkness conscious means learning to see it, to name it, and ultimately to integrate it. And when you do that, something incredible happens. The very parts of you that once felt broken become the source of your deepest wisdom. The pain becomes a teacher. The fear becomes a compass. The chaos, a doorway to clarity. You've walked that path. You've taken your shadow by the hand and said, I see you. I know you're there, and I'm ready to listen. That takes courage. That takes strength. And it's a journey most people avoid their entire lives. But you didn't. You made your shadow a bridge instead of a burden. And now, you move through the world from a place that feels more grounded, more truthful, more real. And if in some way this space has been a companion for you on that journey, if the words you found here have echoed something ancient and familiar within your soul, then know this: you're not walking alone. You're part of something much greater, something that transcends language and time. It's a collective awakening, a shared remembering. There are others, just like you, stepping out of illusion and into authenticity, choosing presence over perfection, choosing wholeness over avoidance. So if your heart feels called to keep exploring, to keep shedding the false and embracing the true, then walk with us. Keep going, because every step you take inward echoes outward. Every time you choose truth over comfort, darkness over denial, light is born, not imagined, not forced, but naturally revealed. You are not who you were, and you are not alone. And if these words have stirred something within you, if you feel that this journey resonates with the quiet truth you carry deep inside, then I invite you to stay close. This space was created for souls like yours, for those who are ready to walk a different path, one of depth, presence, and inner clarity. So, if you haven't already, take a moment to subscribe, not just to a channel, but to a movement of consciousness. Because each video, each reflection, each moment we share here is meant to support your journey and remind you of who you truly are beneath all the noise. Subscribe, and let's keep walking this path together. There are moments in life when you feel different, when something deep within you whispers that you don't quite see the world the way others do. You can't fully explain it, and perhaps you've never been able to. It's not something you chose. It simply is. There's a unique lens through which you perceive reality, one that brings meaning to silence and depth to things that seem mundane to others. While people around you overlook subtle details, you feel them intensely. Silence, for you, speaks louder than noise. You sense when someone is in pain, even if they hide it behind a smile. You feel the sorrow of others, as if it were your own, even when they say nothing at all. You didn't ask to be this way. You've just always been this way. Carl Jung once said that special souls are not born in comfort, but are forged in the silent fire of introspection. And maybe that explains it. Maybe that's why, even as a child, you often felt like you didn't belong, like your soul came from another time, another place entirely. While others ran toward the noise, you turned inward. While the world focused on what was outside, you were busy exploring the universe within. And that, too, came with a cost, a deep, often aching loneliness. Not because you were alone, but because you felt that no one else truly understood the way you feel things, the way you are. But that sensitivity of yours, that emotional depth, that way you connect with life, it isn't a weakness. It's not something to hide or fix. It's a signal, a reminder, a sign that within you lives something extraordinary, a soul. And not just any soul, but a soul that perceives more, that knows without being told. A soul that picks up on invisible frequencies, one that feels what others refuse to acknowledge. You carry an ancient truth inside you, one that you might not yet know how to put into words, but it's there, quietly burning in your chest. If you've ever felt like you're too much for the world, too emotional, too intense, too reflective, it's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because the world hasn't yet learned how to hold the depth of souls like yours. But hear this clearly. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are awake. Awake in a world that is still fast asleep. And when a soul awakens, everything around it begins to change, even if it takes time. Having a special soul means everything touches you more deeply, not because you're fragile, but because your sensitivity allows you to see beyond the surface. You don't just notice people's words, you feel their energy, their sadness, their longing. The pain of others doesn't just pass you by, it lives in your heart, as if it were your own. You carry burdens in silence that others are too afraid to name. The world has probably called you too much, told you to toughen up, to stop thinking so much, to stop feeling so deeply. But what they don't understand is that you can't live any other way. And more importantly, you shouldn't. This way of being, this intensity, is not a curse. It's a blessing in disguise. Carl Jung believed that to discover your light, you must face your shadow. And you, with all your depth and complexity, have faced storms within yourself that others can't even begin to comprehend. You've sat in silence, questioning your purpose. You've felt emptiness that clings to your chest. You've asked again and again, what's the point of all this? And still, you're here, searching, asking, feeling. That voice inside you, that's your soul. And not everyone can hear theirs. Many drown it out with noise, with distractions, with pretending. But not you. You've learned to sit in your silence, even when it hurts. You've learned that wounds don't need to be denied. They need to be honored. That pain doesn't take you away from who you are. It returns you to it. Your soul is special because it chose to feel. It chose not to numb itself. It chose to awaken. And yes, that awakening can be painful. It can feel like a lonely road, but it's also sacred. In a world obsessed with escaping inward truths, you chose to go deeper. While others search endlessly for answers in the external world, you closed your eyes and began to ask questions that only the soul can answer. Who am I? What am I here to give? What does it really mean to live authentically? You may not have all the answers yet, but asking those questions, that already sets you apart. It doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're finding your way back to your truth. A special soul isn't defined by what it accomplishes. It's defined by what it transforms. Every time you chose forgiveness over resentment, every time you allowed yourself to cry when the world told you to be strong, every time you opened your heart despite knowing you could get hurt, you were embodying your true power. Your soul doesn't need applause. It doesn't need validation. It vibrates on a different frequency, and though that frequency can sometimes feel isolating, it is never wrong. In fact, it's exactly what this world needs. And even if you've often felt like you don't fit in, the truth is, you're finally beginning to fit into yourself. You weren't born to fit in. You were born to awaken, to transform, to remind others of the parts of themselves they've forgotten. Jung once said, "A life not lived is a disease from which one can die." And you, even if you've hidden, even if you've gone silent at times, know that there's still a life inside you waiting to be lived. A fire that hasn't gone out. A light that, no matter how wounded, refuses to be extinguished. Your soul isn't special just because it feels different. It's special because it carries a mission that often lives beyond words, beyond logic, beyond what the eyes can see. And that mission isn't always grand or loud. Sometimes it's as quiet as choosing love in a moment of anger, as simple as telling the truth when it's easier to stay silent, as beautiful as seeing someone for who they really are when no one else does. Sometimes it's in the most subtle details, in the way you silently accompany someone, in how you listen without judging, in how you hold space for those who have forgotten how to hold themselves, that your true essence shines through. And maybe no one ever applauded you for that. Maybe you've never received recognition, praise, or even a thank you. But your soul doesn't need applause. It doesn't seek validation. It only seeks truth. Because when you have a different kind of soul, you can't follow the paths that others have paved. You grow tired of the noise, of the shallowness, of trying to fit into molds that were never meant for you. You're not drawn to empty gestures or superficial approval. There is something inside of you that has always searched for more, something more authentic, more profound, more deeply your own. And that search hasn't always been easy, because the more awake you become, the more aware you are of how asleep the world really is. You begin to see the contradictions hidden in everyday life, the pain dressed up as success, the fear disguised as ambition, the disconnection passed off as normality. But you can't pretend. You've tried. You've tried to adapt, to fit in, to do what was expected. And yet, something always felt off. There was a silent discomfort, a quiet emptiness, a persistent voice whispering, "This is not your place." That feeling was never a sign of weakness. It was intuition. It was your soul speaking clearly, asking you to return to yourself, to what you truly are, to the part of you that never sold out, that never completely dimmed its light. And there, in the midst of the discomfort, in the space of not knowing, in the feeling of not belonging, your true transformation began. Because special souls are not recognized in easy moments. They are forged in chaos, in doubt, in pain that forces them to look inward. And when you began that inward journey, something changed. You stopped looking for answers outside yourself. You no longer needed others to validate what you felt. You started becoming your own refuge, your own guide, your own steady flame. And in that place, you discovered something powerful. What once hurt you began to open you. What once separated you began to connect you. What once confused you began to reveal truth. Because a soul that has learned to be with itself is a soul no longer afraid of its own light. And that's when everything begins to take on a new meaning. It no longer hurts to be different. You start to honor it. You understand you weren't born to blend in, but to expand. You weren't meant to follow someone else's path, but to carve out your own, to walk where no footsteps existed before. You stopped needing to be understood by everyone. Instead, You begin to attract those who can truly see you, not with their eyes, but with their soul. Because real connection isn't based on appearances, but on frequency. And when you elevate yours, everything around you begins to shift. That's one of the greatest gifts of a special soul. It awakens others simply by existing. You don't need to do big, loud things to change the world. Sometimes, just by how you look, how you listen, how you are, you begin to light up places that once only knew shadow. And not everyone can do that, because to reach that point, you had to fall. You had to break. You had to ask yourself the questions others were too afraid to speak aloud. And you chose not to stay in your wound. You chose to go through it, to turn it into understanding, into compassion, into a strength that doesn't scream, but stands tall. People who have walked through their own personal hell with awareness are the ones who later walk with the greatest humility. They no longer need to prove anything. They no longer impose themselves because they know who they are. And that truth, even when unspoken, is deeply felt. Your soul is special because it doesn't settle for mere survival. It longs to live fully, deeply, truthfully, with purpose. And that's why anything that isn't real feels unbearably heavy now. Empty conversations, forced connections, externally imposed goals. They no longer fit in your journey. Not because you think you're better, but because you've learned to honor your energy. And when you allow yourself to be, without filters, without masks, life begins to respond in a different way. You no longer chase after anything. You no longer try to convince or prove your worth. You begin to attract what vibrates with your essence, and you let go, without fear, of what you once tried so hard to hold on to. Because now you know, nothing real is forced, and nothing meant for you can be lost. At this point in your path, you no longer seek to belong. You seek truth, presence, peace. And in that process, something subtle but profound begins to awaken inside you. You reconcile with your past, not because you deny it, but because you now see it as sacred ground, the terrain that prepared you to awaken. You forgive what once hurt, not by pretending it didn't matter, but by understanding it deeply, by looking through the eyes of compassion. You begin to feel gratitude, not just for the good things, but for what made you stronger, wiser, more human. Your soul is special, truly, profoundly special, because it chose to awaken in a world that often prefers to remain asleep. It didn't settle for the superficial, but was drawn, almost instinctively, to the essential. And yes, perhaps that has made you feel alone many times. But that solitude was never a punishment. It was a preparation. It was a sacred space of silence, so you could finally hear what no one else could teach you, your own voice. Now you understand that everything you felt wasn't an overreaction. It was sensitivity. Your intensity wasn't a burden. It was a compass, guiding you in ways others couldn't see. The way you love, deeply, differently, isn't a flaw. It's precisely the kind of love this world desperately needs. So don't change. Don't dim your light. Don't hide yourself. This world already has too many copies. But your soul is one of a kind. When the soul truly awakens, it doesn't happen in a burst of fireworks. It's not a sudden flash of enlightenment or a dramatic epiphany. It's a quiet, intimate, almost invisible process on the outside. But inside, it's fiercely transformational. It's as if the broken, forgotten, or dormant pieces of you slowly begin to find each other again, as if something you've been waiting for, maybe even your entire life, finally starts to align. And in that moment, you realize you can no longer live the same way. You can't engage in shallow conversations anymore. You can't stay in jobs that dull your spirit. You can't maintain connections that only survive out of habit. Your soul becomes more selective, not out of arrogance, but from a genuine need to protect its energy. You begin to see that you're not here to be drained. You're here to be expressed, to flourish, deeply, unapologetically. Often, the most special souls are the ones who have endured the greatest trials, not because they deserved it, but because they needed to move through the heaviness in order to remember who they truly are. Some truths only reveal themselves in the dark. Some understandings are born only when the world you once knew collapses. Because it's in that moment, when there's nothing left to hold on to, that you finally discover you were what you were looking for all along. Everything you longed for was already within you, waiting patiently to be seen. You begin to see life through new eyes. What once felt like chaos now feels like movement, necessary, purposeful. What once felt like loss now feels like liberation. You begin to trust the process, even if you don't fully understand it. You learn to stop chasing after what walks away. You stop begging for what doesn't flow. There's a quiet wisdom within you that starts to guide your steps. And even when certainty is absent, your soul knows. And that's enough. The modern world will often ask you to be logical, productive, predictable. But your soul doesn't move in straight lines or follow clocks. Your soul breathes in cycles. It dances in spirals. It speaks in symbols. And it expresses itself through intuition. When you stop resisting its nature, everything becomes clearer. Not easier, but more real. Over time, you realize that true fulfillment doesn't come from meeting the world's expectations. It comes from being radically true to what your inner self whispers to you in silence. And that whisper, though invisible to others, transforms everything. It changes the way you walk through life, the way you choose, the way you create, the way you love. Your special soul didn't come here to be understood by everyone. It came to remind you that you don't need the world's approval to be wholly, fully yourself. The most powerful transformation of having a special soul isn't what you achieve outwardly, but what begins to unfold inwardly. There comes a moment when you realize that real evolution isn't measured by awards, titles, or recognition, but by how well you learn to be with yourself, how you speak to yourself when no one is listening, how you hold yourself up when no one else is there, how you stay loyal to your truth, even when it means disappointing others. That inner loyalty doesn't arrive overnight. It's born after many mistakes, after countless moments where you betrayed yourself just to be liked, to fit in, to hold on to the little you thought you had. But a special soul can't stay away from itself for too long. It can try. It can distract itself. It can even get completely lost for years. But eventually, the moment comes, the one where you can no longer lie to yourself. And when that moment comes, everything changes. You stop chasing what once obsessed you. You realize that many of your goals weren't really yours, that many of your achievements were just masks, that many of your relationships were false shelters, keeping you from facing yourself. And yes, in the beginning, it hurts. Everything you built on a borrowed identity begins to collapse. You feel empty, disoriented, confused. But within that silent collapse, something ignites, a tiny spark, timid, barely noticeable, but so real that you can't ignore it. It's your soul reminding you who you are. And from there, from that most intimate space, you begin to rebuild. Not like before, not to please, not to impress, but to be fully yourself, with all that entails, your shadows, your light, your contradictions, and your truth. As you continue on this path of returning to yourself, something deep begins to shift in the way you relate to the world. You no longer live with the urgency of being understood. You live with the peace of having understood yourself. And from there, from that inner serenity, you begin to live more authentically. You become more mindful of what you consume, more aware of what you say, more intentional about who you share your energy with. You learn to set boundaries, not out of rejection, but out of self-love. You discover that solitude is not the punishment you once believed it was. It's a sacred space where your soul gains strength, where your creativity blooms, where your intuition sharpens. Because when you learn to be with yourself in stillness, everything changes. You no longer panic about emptiness. You no longer tolerate crumbs disguised as love. You no longer seek external validation to feel worthy. And from this new way of inhabiting yourself, you begin to build a different kind of life. The decisions you make are no longer driven by external pressure, but by an inner compass, quiet, but unmistakably true. You begin to feel what aligns with you and what doesn't. You don't need logical reasons. You feel it in your body, in your energy, in your soul. And while this might make you misunderstood by many, it makes you free. Free from conditioning, free from others' expectations, free to live from a place that is honest and real. And in that state, everything begins to align. Not because life is perfect, but because you no longer need it to be. You've learned that even chaos has its beauty, that even loss brings hidden gifts, and that every experience, even the most painful, is a teacher that brings you back to your center. As you continue moving forward on this path of reconnection, you begin to see, without forcing it, that your priorities change, naturally, authentically, because now your life is no longer shaped by what the world expects from you, but by what your soul is finally, wholeheartedly ready to express. What once felt urgent now fades into the background. The things that used to keep you up at night barely catch your attention anymore. It's not because you've become indifferent or careless. It's because you've come to realize that much of your suffering came from trying to control what was never yours to manage. Now, from a clearer and more conscious place within yourself, you begin to let go. You release the desperate need to have all the answers, to fix everything, to carry burdens that were never truly yours to bear. What starts to emerge is a sense of lightness, not because life weighs less, but because you're no longer trying to hold it all together through fear or the exhausting desire to please others. You begin to trust that everything has its own timing, that things arrive when they're meant to and leave when their purpose has been fulfilled. You stop resisting change. You stop begging for someone's attention. You stop trying to explain the unexplainable, because you finally understood that you don't have to fight for what is already yours by nature, your peace, your truth, your path. And in the midst of this shift, something profound happens. You begin to experience time differently. You're no longer in a rush. You no longer chase after a version of success that never belonged to you. Instead, you find beauty in simplicity, in moments of quiet, in the sacred pauses life offers. What once felt boring now becomes your refuge, and what you once searched for outside, validation, affection, purpose, now begins to emerge from within. because you've discovered that the more you give to yourself, the less you rely on a world that never truly knew how to give you what you needed. As time passes, this connection to yourself deepens. It becomes evident in everything you do, in the way you speak, the way you walk, the way you truly listen to others. You no longer need to have all the answers. Just being present is enough. Just seeing people for who they truly are, without filters, without judgment. Your authenticity becomes your language, and without even trying, it begins to transform every space you inhabit. You start to notice that your presence has an impact, even when you say very little. Your calmness says more than any speech could ever express, and your ability to truly see another person without labeling them creates a space where others can finally breathe a little easier. But it's not because you see yourself as better. It's because you've been through the darkness. You didn't run from it. You didn't numb yourself. You stayed long enough to understand it, to learn from it, to come back with light. And that is one of the most powerful gifts a special soul can offer. The ability to return from the abyss with a message. Not everyone can do that. Many escape, distract themselves, deny the pain. But you chose to go through it. And because of that, you can now stand beside others without controlling them. You can understand without needing to be right. You can love without needing to own. You can guide without manipulating. Because you learned how to do those things with yourself. And now you have something real to give. You're no longer trying to save everyone. You're no longer desperate to be seen. You simply walk in alignment with what you feel. And that, in itself, is enough. Those who resonate will come closer. Those who don't will continue on their own path. And you'll be at peace with both outcomes. Because your goal is no longer to belong, but to be in harmony with yourself. That's when you begin to understand that your sensitivity was never a weakness. It was a misunderstood gift. That your need for depth wasn't a flaw. It was your soul calling out for something more. That your discomfort with superficiality wasn't arrogance. It was a sign that you were born to go beyond what's obvious, beyond what's common, beyond what most people settle for. And no, not everyone will get it. Some will say you're too much. Others will think you're making it all up. But you no longer need to explain yourself. You've made peace with being different. And instead of hiding it, now you honor it. Because in your difference lies your essence. In it lives your truth. In it pulses your power. And if all of this has resonated with you, if deep down, something inside you feels that it's no accident you're hearing this, then maybe the time has come. The time to stop hiding who you are. The time to start honoring your sensitivity as a strength. To see your uniqueness not as a burden, but as the gift it truly is. The world doesn't need more masks. It needs awakened souls like yours. So if this message has reached you, if it's reminded you of something your soul already knew, then I invite you to keep walking this path with us. Subscribe to the channel and join us as we continue exploring these sacred spaces where the mind, the soul, and consciousness meet. You're not here by coincidence. Something deep within you brought you to this video at this exact moment, and by the time you finish listening, you'll understand why. While many people lose sight of the deeper origin of their existence, there are souls that enter this world with a quiet purpose, a kind of internal compass. It's not something easily explained with words, but it's something you can feel with profound intensity. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung once spoke of a wisdom that lies beyond the conscious mind, a part of ourselves that already knew the way, long before we ever took our first steps. And if you're watching this, it's likely because your soul isn't lost, but rather following through on a deep, ancient agreement, a choice made long before your birth. There are signs, and once you begin to notice them, everything starts to make sense. One of the first signs is this. From an early age, you sensed that life had a deeper meaning. You weren't like the others. While those around you were easily distracted by superficial things, you felt a strange kind of longing for something you couldn't name. You asked questions that didn't have easy answers, and you sought meaning in even the smallest of gestures. There was something within you, pulling you to look beyond what the eye could see, to sense what others overlooked. This wasn't pride or arrogance. It was a subtle memory, a kind of echo from your soul that whispered you were here for something greater. And even if that made you feel different, misunderstood, or even isolated at times, you could never silence that inner feeling. It was a quiet certainty that your path would never look like everyone else's. And though that certainty may have been uncomfortable at times, it stayed with you, like a flame that burns softly in the depths of your being. The feeling that there's something more wasn't something you were taught. It was something you were born with. While others were entirely focused on the external world, you were already exploring your inner one. You asked questions no one else seemed to consider, about suffering, about the meaning of life, about the essence of the human soul. And you didn't ask these questions from a place of childish curiosity, but rather from a wisdom that felt ancient, as if it had followed you here from somewhere far away. Souls like yours don't need external proof to know that their life has purpose. There's something inside that constantly affirms it, even when the world outside doesn't understand. Maybe, as a child, you felt like you were watching the world from the outside, like what was happening around you couldn't fully explain what you were feeling inside. That disconnection wasn't emptiness. It was your soul reminding you of the agreement you made, that this life wasn't your first, and that you were walking the path of awakening once again. And that's why, even in the face of challenges, doubts, and inner turmoil, something within you always pushed you forward. A kind of instinct that you couldn't justify with logic, but that you always knew was real. That sense of being on a mission, even if you didn't know exactly what it was. That feeling that you needed to experience certain moments with depth, and that every step, even the painful ones, was guiding you towards something meaningful. This is one of the clearest signs that your soul chose this path long before you arrived. Because this life isn't just about living, it's about remembering why you came. And when a soul makes that silent choice, that sacred commitment before birth, the world can often feel heavier, slower, more confusing. While others are learning everything for the first time, you're remembering how to feel with the soul, how to see with depth, how to endure and understand processes that most people don't even have words for. This can create a strange kind of disconnect from reality. You might be surrounded by people and still feel distant. You might be doing everything that's expected of you, yet feel like you're betraying your own truth. And that's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because your consciousness is wired to a higher plane. Your sensitivity allows you to perceive dimensions that others can't see. Maybe you've also noticed that certain pains hit you harder than they seem to hit others, that losses, emotions, and even silences affect you deeply. almost as if you've lived them all before. That's because souls that choose to come with conscious missions do so, knowing that they'll need profound sensitivity to fulfill them. And while that sensitivity may have made you vulnerable, it's also the most powerful tool you carry within. You knew all of this before arriving. Your soul didn't choose comfort, it chose purpose. And that choice reveals itself in your earliest years, in the form of intuition, existential questions, and a way of perceiving the world that never accepted surface-level answers. You weren't meant to conform to what doesn't resonate with your spirit. You came to remember, to transform, to awaken something that was planted deep within you long before you were ever born. Second sign. You have gone through intense trials that defy rational explanation, yet hold profound spiritual purpose. These are not random misfortunes, but deeply intentional moments that your soul agreed to face long before you took your first breath. The souls that consciously choose their path before birth do not seek comfort, ease, or shortcuts. They know, at the deepest level, that certain experiences are essential. Essential to awaken dormant memories, to ignite hidden gifts, to refine their awareness, and to transform the very fabric of who they are. That's why, throughout your life, you've probably felt as if hardships strike without warning, suddenly, without reason, like life is testing you more than it tests others. And still, despite the chaos, despite the pain, something inside you has endured, not out of stubbornness or pride, but out of a sacred strength, an inner resilience that only awakens when everything else seems to collapse. It doesn't shout, it doesn't fight, it simply is, steady like a silent flame that refuses to die. Maybe you've faced unexpected losses, endings that tore you apart, emptiness so vast, no one around you could understand it. And while others moved on, barely questioning anything, you felt the weight of each moment. Every painful experience didn't just hurt, it shaped you. It carved into your being like a chisel, not to destroy, but to reveal what had been buried under layers of forgetfulness, to uncover the truth that you were always meant to remember. These trials were never random. They came into your life because, at some point beyond time, your soul welcomed them. It knew that through them, you would expand. You would remember. You would find your way back to a deeper truth. A mission that, on the surface, may have seemed lost, but never really was. And now, looking back, you begin to see that those moments weren't punishments. They were sacred teachers, lessons you couldn't have learned in any other way. They pushed you inward when the outside world no longer made sense. They shattered the inner structures that were no longer aligned with your truth. They forced you to confront yourself, to strip away every illusion until all that remained was raw authenticity. The souls who choose such a path do not do so from ego. They choose it from the wisdom of eternity, from the knowing that pain, when moved through with awareness, does not destroy, it reveals. It does not weaken, it transforms. And you know this, because you felt it. There are experiences you knew somehow were not punishments, but activations. After every fall, something inside you awakened. Your vision changed, your empathy deepened, your sensitivity grew more refined, and your connection to the unseen became more intimate. Maybe no one around you understood this process. Maybe even you questioned it at times. But somewhere deep within, you knew. You knew that your pain was not in vain, that it was clearing the path for you to become who you truly are. Not the version of you created to survive the world, but the one who came here to remember, to heal, to expand the wisdom your soul already carried. And that kind of growth? It cannot be taught in books. It cannot be explained in words. It must be lived. It must be breathed. It must be embodied. And that is why you are not broken. You are becoming. You are in the middle of a sacred process. A process your soul chose long before your mind could comprehend it. These trials have been more than hardships. They've been hidden doors. They don't always appear as openings at first, but over time, you begin to realize, behind every loss, every breakdown, every shadowed chapter, there was a seed that could only take root in shaken ground. Because the souls that walk this path aren't looking for surface-level growth. They are seeking depth, and depth cannot be found in the shallows of life. It is found in the long silences, in the sleepless nights, in the cracks that cannot be hidden. You didn't become wise by accident. You became wise because life stripped away what no longer served you, so it could fill you with what you had forgotten. And even when you felt like you were reaching your limit, that quiet part of you, that ancient awareness, was always there, watching, holding, whispering, without words, that what you are living, you already knew, not with your mind, but with your soul. And it is that memory, that deep inner knowing, that keeps you moving forward. Not from force, not from resistance, but from a trust that blossoms in silence. A trust that grows when you finally recognize that even the hardest trials are part of a sacred agreement. One that your mind may not fully understand, but your soul feels with greater clarity each day. Third sign. You possess a sensitivity that goes far beyond the emotional. It is a perception that comes from the soul itself. It's not just that you feel deeply, it's that you perceive beyond what others seem to notice. You pick up on the energy of spaces. You sense what isn't spoken in a conversation. You intuit when something doesn't align with the truth, even if everything appears perfectly normal on the outside. And this isn't a coincidence. It's a clear sign that your soul came into this life with an awakened consciousness, with a level of sensitivity that isn't developed here on Earth. It's carried with you from before you were even born. It's the subtle memory of someone who has already walked this path before and has learned to read life through different eyes. You didn't arrive with this heightened awareness by accident. You came with it because you knew, even before you incarnated, that this human experience would be filled with illusions, that not everything would be visible. And so you brought with you internal tools to navigate a world where truth often hides beneath layers of appearances. This sensitivity acts as a channel. It connects you to people, to environments, to the unseen. And although it can sometimes feel like a burden, because everything affects you more deeply, reaches you more intensely, it is also your greatest guide. It is how your soul reminds you that you are not here to disconnect from what you feel, but to refine it, to transform it into guidance, into clarity, into a silent yet unshakable power. Your sensitivity is not a weakness, even if others have tried to convince you otherwise. It is a deep intelligence, a higher form of awareness. While many people react from noise and chaos, you perceive from silence. And even though this has often made you feel out of place, what it really means is that you're tuned into a more subtle dimension of existence. There are things you sense before they happen, shifts in someone's energy, endings that are announced without words, opportunities that are felt without any physical evidence. And although you've sometimes doubted yourself because you lacked tangible proof, your perception has never been wrong. It doesn't operate through the mind. It flows from the spirit. And that inner channel is active because your soul knew, before you were born, that you would need it. It knew that this life would bring challenges that logic alone could not solve. That's why your sensitivity is also a compass, one that points you toward what is real, toward what resonates with your truth. It's also why noisy environments exhaust you, why empty conversations feel uncomfortable, and why you can't remain for long in spaces where everything is shallow. Because your soul recognizes what is heavy, what is false, what is disconnected. And even if you can't always put it into words, you feel it. And that's enough. Your perception isn't broken, it's awake. And in a world that has fallen asleep, that can seem strange. But you are not here to blend in. You are here to remember that this sensitivity is not only part of who you are, it's one of the very reasons you chose this path. Your heightened perception has also led you to carry emotions that weren't even yours. You've felt the pain of others as if it were your own. You've been hurt by an unspoken word, by an avoided gaze, by an unexplained absence. And even when you couldn't name what you were feeling, you knew it was real. Your body registered it, your energy absorbed it, and your soul understood it from a place that needs no logic to validate it. Over time, maybe you tried to shut that sensitivity off, to fit in, to stop feeling so much, to protect yourself. But turning it off felt like abandoning your own essence, like losing the language through which your soul speaks. This sensitivity is also your gift, because it allows you to see the truth behind the masks, to understand what others deny, and to be a healing presence that doesn't seek answers, but connection. Not all souls choose to come into this world with such openness. It requires courage. It means walking through life without armor, with your soul exposed, with your senses heightened. But you chose it. And even though you may have experienced it as a burden at times, it is, in truth, a sacred tool. You are not here to harden yourself. You are here to refine this capacity even further, to turn your sensitivity into wisdom, into discernment, into service. Because to feel is not just to be emotional. It's to receive the truth of experience and allow it to transform you. Your sensitivity has also guided you through moments when logic had no answers. You've made important decisions because something inside you simply knew. Not because it was safe, not because someone confirmed it, but because that internal certainty was stronger than any external doubt. And when you look back, you realize that it was that voice, that quiet intuition that once felt so fragile, that protected you the most, aligned you the most, and held you the most when the rest of the world couldn't. That way of sensing has made you deeply perceptive, not just with yourself, but with others. You can read the energy of a room the moment you walk in. You can detect the inconsistency behind a forced smile. You can be there for someone without needing many words, because your soul doesn't require explanations. It needs presence. And that's why you've never been able to tolerate hollow relationships. You can't force yourself to stay where there is no truth, where emotions are denied, where the soul cannot speak. That rejection is not arrogance. It is energetic coherence. It is your soul choosing to protect its vibrational integrity. This way of perceiving, even if it has brought you pain, is a clear confirmation that your soul not only chose this journey, but came equipped with the exact sensitivity needed to walk it. Because it's not enough to just move through life. You have to know how to feel your way through it. And that you've carried within you long before you ever arrived here. Fourth sign. Life has led you time and again toward the inner path, even when you tried to escape it. Maybe you attempted to fit into what's considered normal, sought answers outside yourself, followed paths others laid out, but something inside you never let it happen. Every time you tried to distract yourself from the inner call, life found a way to bring you back to yourself. That return inward wasn't a coincidence. It was part of the agreement your soul made before being born, to always come back to center, even if you wander, even if you forget, even if it hurts. Some people go their whole lives without asking deep questions, but not you. Inside you, there's an invisible compass that can't stand disconnection, a kind of homesickness for truth that emerges every time you drift away from your essence. And no matter how hard you try, that part of you always pushes you to look within, to feel what you avoid, to face what makes you uncomfortable, to remember what you came here to do. It's not an obsession, it's a pact. And that's why, when you ignore that calling, life doesn't stay quiet. It starts to stir, to shake things up, to show you that what's outside can never give you what's already inside. That pull toward the inner road doesn't always show up gently. Sometimes it comes as a crisis, as losses that shake your foundations, as stages where everything you knew stops making sense. And even though it may feel like everything is falling apart, what's really collapsing is everything that can no longer hold the truth of your soul. That emptiness you feel is not a punishment. It's space. Space for the new to enter, for what's real to emerge, for what you forgot to remember to make its way through. Your soul didn't choose the easiest road, but it did choose the deepest one. And that depth demands a constant reconnection with yourself. That's why you can't stay asleep for long, because every time you do, something inside you dims. And when that light dims, life starts speaking to you in other ways. Discomfort, restlessness, existential fatigue. None of that is random. It's all a way to push you back to the center. That center isn't found outside, not in goals, not in approval, not in what others expect of you. Your center lives in the invisible, in the part of you that hears silence, that recognizes the signs, that knows every experience, no matter how hard, is part of your awakening. Not everyone hears that call, but you, no matter how much you try to ignore it, you always find yourself returning. And that return is not weakness, it's spiritual maturity. It's the soul remembering that no matter how far you've gone, you've never really been lost. You've just been coming home to yourself. And this constant return has given every phase of your life a deeper layer. No matter how ordinary things may look on the surface, inside, there's always something unfolding, a realization taking root, a quiet integration, a transformation that doesn't need to be visible to be real. Some seek their purpose in the outside world, but you found it in the intimate act of feeling again, of looking at yourself honestly, of recognizing your contradictions, of accepting your shadow without judgment, and embracing what you once rejected in yourself. This cycle of introspection isn't something someone taught you. It's in your nature. It's part of the wisdom your soul chose to bring with it, because you knew this life wouldn't be just an outer experience. It would be an inner journey, one where the deeper you go, the more clarity you find to help light the way for others. And maybe that's why you've often felt disconnected from the superficial, from what only seeks to distract, because inside you, there's a much older calling, a mission that doesn't shout but is always felt, a presence that reminds you again and again that your place in this world isn't just any place. It's the place where you can be yourself, without masks, without acting, without denying your truth. That's why you always return to yourself. And every time you do, you grow stronger, not like someone coming back wounded, but like someone who remembers, with more truth, with more presence, with more light. Fifth sign. You feel like your existence has a purpose, even if you can't quite explain it. You don't need external proof or someone to validate it for you. There's something inside you that simply knows, a silent certainty that's always been there, like a seed that no matter how long it takes to bloom, never stops pulsing with life. It doesn't mean you've always had clarity. You've doubted, you've felt lost, even thought maybe you were disconnected from everything. But despite it all, the intuition that your life isn't just a coincidence has remained untouched. Because your soul didn't arrive here by accident. It came with intention. And that intention sometimes appears as unanswered questions, as a longing that nothing material can satisfy, as a restless feeling constantly pushing you to find meaning in every experience. It doesn't matter if the world understands or if no one else sees it. You feel it. You feel there's something you came here to offer, something only you can bring into existence, something that doesn't always have a clear shape, but is so alive within you that ignoring it would feel like betraying yourself. That sense doesn't come from the mind. It comes from the soul. And it's one of the clearest signs that you're not here just to pass through life, but to awaken within it. That purpose isn't always grand in appearance. It doesn't always translate into huge accomplishments, public recognition, or visible external goals. Sometimes it shows up in how you silently hold space for others, in how deeply you dwell in your own darkness, in the honesty with which you choose to live, even when the world pushes you in the opposite direction. You're not here to imitate someone else's version of success. You're here to be a witness of what's real. And that witness doesn't always make noise, but it leaves a trace. The way you walk through your story, the integrity with which you choose your path, the love with which you hold the unseen, all of it is part of the purpose your soul chose long before you arrived here. You may not have all the answers yet, but that doesn't mean you're far from your purpose. It means you're getting closer, because real purpose isn't understood all at once. It's revealed in layers, with every moment of presence, with every truth you choose to honor, with every time you decide to keep feeling instead of shutting down. Your soul knew this path wouldn't be easy. It knew it would hurt sometimes, that you'd have doubts, but it also knew you had the strength. You have the memory, the sensitivity, and the awareness needed to fulfill what you came here to manifest. And the fact that you're here, listening to this, feeling something stir inside you, even if you can't explain it, is proof that this memory is still alive. You don't need to understand everything right now. You just need to keep awakening that part of you that's never forgotten why you're here. That quiet purpose has also been what held you together when everything else felt like it was falling apart, when you didn't know where to go, when you lost motivation, when no answers came. Still, something inside kept urging you forward. A subtle force that doesn't come from ego or willpower, but from a deeper awareness that transcends this life. And so, even when you felt out of place, that feeling wasn't a sign of being wrong. It was a confirmation of your direction. Because souls that come with purpose can't feel at ease in the superficial. They can't stay where there's no depth, and they don't rest until they begin to live in alignment with who they really are. Maybe many times you've asked yourself, why can't I just fit in? Why do things affect me so deeply when others seem unaffected? Why do I crave silence, truth, presence? It's because your soul didn't come here to live asleep. It came to awaken and to help others do the same, not through words, but through your energy, your presence, the way you move through life with awareness. That purpose is a frequency, and when you vibrate in it, everything begins to feel more aligned, more light, more real. Not because the world changes, but because you no longer need to deny yourself to belong. Your soul has already remembered why it chose this path. And now, all that's left is to walk it with more truth. Thank you for making it this far. If all of this resonated with you, it wasn't by chance. It was your soul recognizing what it already knew. Because no matter how many times you forget or how far you drift, the truth of who you are always finds its way back to you. Carl Jung believed that life doesn't begin the day we're born, but the day we choose to listen to that inner voice that's been waiting. And if today you feel that voice has awakened just a little more, it means your process has already begun. You don't need to understand it all. You just need to keep walking with presence, with honesty, and with the certainty that your soul chose this path with wisdom. If this message accompanied you, if you felt something shift within you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and let's keep going deeper together on this journey where soul and awareness meet. See you in the next video. Thank you for being here.
Have you ever wondered what others truly perceive about you? Not what you say, not what you do, not even the image you try to project. I'm talking about the energy you radiate without even realizing it. The essence that lingers when you're present. Have you ever stopped to consider how your energy influences those around you, shaping the world in ways you might never notice? We often believe that our identity is defined by our appearance, our actions, or the words we speak. But in reality, it goes much deeper. Society has conditioned us to think that who we are is based on what we show, on the achievements we accumulate, on the image we construct. However, Carl Jung, one of the most profound minds in psychology, spoke of something far more significant: individuation. For Jung, individuation is a journey of uncovering our true selves beyond external expectations, fears, and the shadows that haunt us. It's not about becoming someone new, but about peeling away the layers imposed upon us and remembering who we have always been. And while that may sound simple, it is often a difficult and challenging process. From the moment we are born, the world begins shaping us. As children, we are taught to fit in, to follow rules, to meet expectations. We become characters in a story we didn't write. Jung referred to this as the masks we wear, the roles we adopt to navigate society. We put on different faces depending on the situation. One at work, another with family, another with friends. And over time, we lose sight of what lies beyond those masks. The raw, unfiltered version of ourselves has been waiting to emerge. If you've ever felt out of place, as if something deep inside you is calling to be recognized, it's because your true self is trying to break through. But answering that call is no easy task. It takes courage to look within, to confront the parts of yourself that you've ignored or hidden away. Jung spoke of the unconscious, that vast space where we store everything we've been taught to suppress. Our fears, our unspoken desires, our emotions left unexpressed. Yet, within that same space lies the key to our liberation. Imagine that within you, there exists a seed of something pure, unique, and untouched by societal conditioning. But that seed cannot grow if you keep feeding what you are not. It cannot thrive if you continue shaping yourself to please others rather than listening to your own inner voice. According to Jung, individuation is the act of allowing its seed to flourish, to grow into a tree with deep roots, unafraid to stand tall in its true form. For this seed to thrive, it must be nurtured with self-awareness and authenticity. This means embracing every aspect of who you are, the light and the darkness, the strengths and flaws. But this journey isn't just about self-discovery. It's also about integration. Because within you, There is not only light but also shadows, the anger, the insecurities, the fear of rejection. Jung reminds us that true wholeness comes when we stop running from those shadows and learn to embrace them. We cannot be complete if we deny any part of ourselves. Transformation happens the moment we understand that even our darkest aspects hold value, that they, too, are a part of who we are. The shadow isn't something to be erased. It's something to be understood and integrated into who we are. Imagine an uncut diamond. Its worth is already there, but it needs refining, pressure, and shaping to reveal its brilliance. The same applies to you. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to refine what's already within. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. But with each step you take toward your authentic self, you move closer to a life of depth and meaning. The real question is, are you willing to look inward? To let go of expectations and confront your true nature? Jung believed that the greatest act of bravery is facing oneself, and that is the first step in this journey. But you don't have to do it alone. There are philosophies and practices that can support you, and in this space, we will explore some of them. You might be wondering, where do I start? The answer is simple. Start by observing. Listen to the thoughts that hold you back. Question beliefs imposed on you, and ask yourself, how much of what I do each day comes from genuine desire, and how much stems from the fear of not being enough? Examine your patterns. Watch your reactions. Begin to notice which parts of yourself have been buried for too long. The truth is, you are already enough. You don't need external validation. You don't need the world to confirm your worth. What you truly need is to remember who you are. And in the next stages of this journey, we will dive deeper into that understanding. Authenticity is not just a philosophical concept. It is a transformative force that can redefine how we live. In the previous section, we explored Carl Jung's individuation process and how it pushes us to embrace our shadows and acknowledge our true essence. Now, let's go even deeper, drawing insights from other thinkers and analyzing how this inner journey impacts our daily lives. To begin with, Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, argued that those who find a sense of purpose can endure even the harshest suffering. Having survived the horrors of Nazi concentration camps, he concluded that life's meaning isn't found in fleeting pleasure, but in the pursuit of a deeper internal mission that gives our existence direction. Connecting this to Jung's ideas, we see that individuation is not just about self-discovery. It's a crucial survival mechanism, both emotionally and psychologically. When we live authentically, we no longer rely on external approval to define us. Instead, we develop an inner compass to guide us. Friedrich Nietzsche, on the other hand, spoke of the necessity of becoming who we truly are. He believed that society imposes values that suppress individuality, and only those who dare to challenge these norms can reach their full potential. In everyday life, we see this reflected in the relentless pressure to conform, working in jobs we don't love, maintaining relationships dictated by others' expectations, and living in constant fear of disapproval. If we take a closer look at our choices, we might realize that many of them are not made from a place of authenticity, but from a deep-seated fear of rejection. Consider someone who grew up in an environment where financial security was emphasized above all else. From an early age, their parents instilled in them the belief that choosing a profitable career was the key to success, even if it meant abandoning their true passion. Over the years, this person follows the expected path, seeking stability rather than fulfillment. Yet, despite having a career that ensures financial comfort, they feel an increasing sense of emptiness, their energy becoming scattered and dim. Hunin and Etchi would suggest a clear path in this scenario. This person needs to reconnect with their essence and challenge the structures that confine them. Here is where the courage to face one's fears becomes crucial. The psychoanalyst Eric from identified fear of freedom as one of the greatest barriers to authenticity. He argued that many people prefer the security of established rules over the responsibility of shaping their own lives. And this is entirely understandable. To be authentic is to take risks. It means stepping away from the familiar, making unpopular choices, and sometimes walking alone. Yet, it also means tapping into an endless source of vitality and purpose. Carl Jung spoke of shadow integration as an essential step in individuation, but how does this translate into everyday life? Imagine someone who, due to past experiences, has developed a deep-seated fear of failure. Over time, they have internalized a belief that they are not good enough. As a result, they avoid taking risks, choosing security over passion, and never truly pursuing their dreams. Their shadow, this fear of failure, silently governs every decision they make. However, instead of repressing this fear, if they choose to confront it, observe it, and work through it, they can begin to break free from its grip. In practical terms, this could mean embracing small challenges, stepping into unfamiliar situations, and learning to experience failure without equating it to their self-worth. As Lao Tzu once said, "When you realize that nothing is lacking, the whole world belongs to you." This is a profound lesson in authenticity. We do not need more degrees, more recognition, or more external validation to feel whole. Authenticity is not about accumulating more. It is about being fully ourselves. When we stop seeking externally what we already possess internally, our energy shifts dramatically. Anxiety lessens, clarity increases, and our relationships become more genuine. Another philosopher who offers a powerful perspective on authenticity is Alan Watts, who emphasized the importance of flowing with life rather than resisting it. Watts compared life to the movement of a river. When we try to control every aspect of our existence, we become rigid and suffer. But when we learn to trust our own natural rhythm, things start falling into place effortlessly. This does not mean surrendering to fate or being passive, but rather developing a profound trust in our ability to navigate life with authenticity. This brings us back to the energy we project. As mentioned earlier, a person who exudes a sense of abundance is not necessarily someone with material wealth or social status. True power lies in those who have worked on themselves to the point of no longer needing to prove anything. Their energy becomes magnetic, not because of what they own, but because of their deep self-awareness and acceptance. Think of figures like Buddha or Gandhi. Neither possessed material riches, yet their presence alone was transformative. Their authenticity was their greatest strength. Authenticity also plays a fundamental role in our relationships. In a world where so many interactions are built on appearances, those who dare to be real stand out. Being true to yourself is an act of courage. Jung believed that genuine connection only happens when we reveal our real selves, without masks, without pretense. When we approach life from a place of authenticity, we naturally attract people and opportunities that resonate with who we truly are. It acts as a filter, pushing away what drains us and bringing closer what nurtures our growth. If we want to shift our energy and transform our lives, we must start with a fundamental question. Am I living from my true self or from fear? Are the choices I make a reflection of who I am, or am I simply following expectations placed upon me? These questions may be unsettling, but they mark the beginning of a profound transformation. The world is full of people who live half-heartedly, who have sacrificed their authenticity to fit a mold, afraid of breaking away from the script they were given. But it is also filled with those who have embraced their true nature despite the risks. These are the ones who leave a mark, who inspire, who change the course of history. The choice is yours. Continue conforming to what the world expects, or dare to be who you truly are. There is no single right path, only the path that aligns with your essence. And when you choose authenticity over conformity, you realize that real freedom is not found in seeking the approval of others, but in fully accepting yourself. Throughout this journey, we have explored self-knowledge, authenticity, and transformation. We've come to understand that authenticity is not just an abstract ideal, but a daily practice that demands courage and commitment. By diving into the wisdom of Carl Jung and other great thinkers, we have uncovered how our energy, our hidden selves, and our internal purpose shape the reality we experience. At the start, we pose a crucial question. Why do some people radiate a magnetic energy, while others fade into the background? We discover that the key is not external success, but the depth of authenticity with which one lives. Jung taught that the process of individuation, the journey of integrating all parts of oneself, is the most significant task a person can undertake. It is this integration that allows us to channel a coherent and powerful energy. We also delved into the concept of the shadow, that hidden aspect of our psyche that we suppress out of fear of rejection. Ignoring it does not make it disappear. It only strengthens its influence on our behaviors and choices. Accepting and working with our shadow liberates the energy that was once trapped in denial and self-deception. In the second part, we address a new question. How can we transform our energy and live in fulfillment rather than lack? We drew from the teachings of Viktor Frankl and Lao Tzu to realize that true abundance is not about material wealth, but about the meaning we assign to our lives and the relationship we have with ourselves. Frankl showed us that those who find an internal sense of purpose can endure any hardship. While Nietzsche urged us to embrace who we truly are, challenging societal expectations without fear, we learned that the energy we emit is a direct reflection of our inner world. If we operate from fear and insecurity, we will attract experiences that reinforce those emotions. But if we cultivate gratitude, self-assurance, and trust in our path, the external world will respond in harmony with that energy. This does not mean settling for less or giving up on our ambitions. It means shifting the intention behind our pursuits. Instead of chasing validation from the outside, we learn to move forward with the confidence that what is meant for us will come at the right time. Now, as we reach this final part, it is crucial to remember that abundance is not the absence of problems. It is the strength and resilience to face them. It is not about everything going exactly as planned, but about embracing challenges as stepping stones to growth. People who live in true fulfillment are not those who never make mistakes, but those who understand that their well-being does not depend on external circumstances. It stems from the relationship they have with themselves. Every time we feel something is missing, it is an invitation to return to our center. Instead of focusing on what we lack, we can choose to recognize and appreciate what is already present. Gratitude shifts our perspective, revealing hidden opportunities in every experience. When we stop chasing happiness outside of ourselves and learn to nurture within, the energy of abundance naturally flows as a reflection of our inner state. If this message resonated with you, consider taking the next step. Ask yourself, from what mindset am I approaching my life? Am I operating from scarcity and fear, or from trust and wholeness? Transformation begins with a conscious choice. Today, you have the power to reshape how you perceive reality and to start acting from a place of inner certainty. To continue deepening this journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive more content like this. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message and leave a comment below. What does abundance mean to you? Remember, you are enough just as you are. Thank you for being part of this journey toward authenticity and abundance. Now it's your turn. What step will you take today to live from your true essence? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video. Trust in yourself and in your process.